Welcome to the SWET talk shop. Lynn, would you like to give us a quick intro to what we're doing today?
Thank you, Richard. We have been reading and listening to talks about ChatGPT for several months, and wordsmiths in Japan and elsewhere relating to Japan are testing it out and asking questions and drawing their conclusions. So how should we use this new tool? What should we think of it? How much more do we need to learn about it? And we're very happy to have this opportunity for SWET to discuss this. And Richard, thank you for being willing to moderate this session and help us ask the questions and discuss our experiences in whatever ways we have used this. And let's go.
Thanks, Lynn. So the first thing I want to say is that I'm not an expert at ChatGPT. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm just a freelance translator, and I like technology. And also, this is a very, very early stage of ChatGPT, and I've only been experimenting with it very little. So there's still so much more that can be done with it. But I wanted to put up a poll. Have you ever used ChatGPT? Yes or no? And have you used it for work? Yes or no? And submit your answer. Of the, how many people we have here? 18, 19 at the moment in total. And the answer to the poll is, have you ever used it? 67% yes, 33% no. Have you used it for work? 50-50. Thank you. So maybe we can start, maybe I'll ask Chris Hoddle to ask your question, you know, sort of your very beginner question for everybody. We can start there.
So my question is, what is ChatGPT and what can you do with it?
Okay, thanks. That's my question too. I guess I should just jump right in and show you, since we have 33% people haven't even used it. So I guess not seen it. What I'm going to do then is share my screen right away. So what we have here is a browser window. This is how it looks when you open it up. The default is GPT-3.5, but I'm paying money for GPT-4, so I can choose GPT-4. And Chris, I remember you, just before we started, you asked, like, is this AI and what's the difference between these different models? As far as I understand, what these things are based on is a large language model. Let me just show you. So I can choose GPT-4. This is newer, and it goes up to, I forget, 2021. But as you can see on your screen, it gives you a reasoning, speed, conciseness. If you go for the paid version, which is like 2,000 yen a month, I think, at this point, it's apparently much better, reasoning and conciseness, etc. And so what can you use it for?
Maybe you could ask Richard what people have used it for, who have used it. Then you get all the different answers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you want to type it into the chat without necessarily speaking, you can do that, and I'll read out the answers. So yeah, Nathan writes, you don't get to choose the version with the free trial. No, you only have GPT-4 if you pay for it. It says plus. So sample translation as a tool to get different perspectives. From my experience, it's a really great thesaurus, and I can show you an example. Also, Nathan writes, I sometimes feel it's feed it clumsy paragraphs and ask it to give me some ideas to edit for clarity. I suppose you don't have to necessarily feed it clumsy paragraphs, you could just feed it your own and say, well, that's the whole key. What kind of prompt do you use? This is one of the phrases, nomenclature, Jeremy, that you have to learn. So when you enter something into the box for, what we're used to as search, but in ChatGPT, it's called a prompt, and you're prompting the chat bot to give you an answer. So to give you a better answer, you keep feeding it more questions, better questions. And prompt engineering is kind of the art or the science of, asking it, learning to ask it the right questions, or designing series of questions to give you better answers. So other people say what they use ChatGPT for is finding different translations for a single passage. It helps to paraphrase. Jason says, handy for subtitles. Helps to paraphrase, yeah, quite a bit. It's great in summarizing things. Tom Golly, I've used it to translate first drafts from Japanese to English. Have to check and rewrite the English translation for certain, but it saves a huge amount of time. And the quality of the final translation is the same. We'll have to talk about that. We'll have to get you on mic, Tom, to talk about that.
Sure, now or later, anytime is okay.
Maybe
comment?
Later you can
Later.
remind me.
Fine.
Okay, so yeah, in talking about the prompt engineering, yeah, Jason confirms it's the quality of your prompts, or the engineering of your prompts. That's kind of a technical way to say it. Prompt engineering is directly related to the quality of the output. Interesting opinions. Yuko Kubo uses it to get opinions for and against the same theme. Theme in what sense? I'm not sure. Yuko?
Yes, I mean, it's a subject. Maybe because personally, I have my own opinion, but that there must be different opinions. So to input, from the different aspect before I write on a certain theme. So instead of asking a lot of people, which technically it's impossible, so that I ask AI, are there any other opinions in the world?
I see. So you're writing, you're creating, it's creating something, some piece.
Yes.
So in a way, it's a research tool in a way for you.
Well, yeah, yes, maybe, yeah, the research is very, primary. Yeah, it's a very beginning, at the very beginning, the stage. Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Also, it's used, Tom Golly has used it to rewrite English written by native Japanese speakers. And that also requires final polishing, but saves a lot of time. Yes, I imagine that can be very useful. Mostly for linguistic experiments to test for factual accuracy. And as we all know, it makes a lot of mistakes. Charles Wolfe. True. Right, and the follow-up on that is that yes, it's very poor in factual information, but could be getting better. Chris, did you have something to say here?
Yes, I did. I'd like to ask a second question. So the first question was, how do you use it? Sorry, what do you use it for? Maybe because people are giving things that they can do with it, but maybe the second question would be, how exactly do you ask it a question? I mean, I've seen different kinds of translations where you can copy a text in Japanese, put it on, press the button, and then you get a rough translation of the English. Is that exactly how it works? Do you copy a text, or do you actually ask it a specific question? And if so, what would be the kind of questions you ask?
Yes,
Richard,
okay.
Richard, why don't you give a demonstration? Actually, share your screen again and type in some prompts, and so for the people who haven't used it, they'll get a better idea of how it works.
Okay, will do. I was just going to do that. So, in fact, I have a few things that I was going to share, and one is when I had this to translate seite, I wanted a different way to say seite, as in establishing a charter. So what I do is I ask this, and to get to ChatGPT, I said, what verbs are commonly used to describe the act of a company setting up or establishing an environmental charter? And the answer comes up quite quickly. When describing the act of a company setting up or establishing an environmental charter, various verbs can be used to convey the action. Some common verbs include, as you all can see, and you can choose from the list. So it becomes, you know, a simple thesaurus in that way. Then I took what I was translating, especially, so 会社 X では近年の安全衛生や環境に関連する社会的な要求などを考慮し、etc. And I have this 社会的な要求, which is, yeah, social need or requirement or demand. And so my prompt was describing a reason for establishing an occupational health and safety and environmental charter. What synonyms can be used instead of societal pressure? Or that's how I thought about that. And so I put that into, I can start a new chat or I just continue. New chat, you just click there. But yeah, so, oh, by the way, it's 3.5, so we go to GPT-4 and put that in there. And here are the responses. Yeah, so I looked through here, you know, actually these are different from what came up for me before, because what I wound up choosing, here's the list that came up before. Is it exactly the same? Not exactly sure. It looks the same. So
I think was your question the same, Richard? I have just glancing at it, had the sense that the question we just saw was slightly different. Oh wait, never
no,
mind. It's what's highlighted now and what's below it.
yeah. Anyway, you can choose from the list, and so in a way that's how you can use it for translating. Or you could actually just say, you know, please translate this. And as someone in the chat described, well, it's comparable to an MT like DeepL. We can put in very simply, please translate this into English, and you know, it gives you societal demands. Does that answer your question, basically, Chris? Does it give you some idea?
Yes, it does. In that context, it's a very good example of what you can do with it. can you do the same? So somebody said about asking for different opinions and different different translations for a single passage. These are as a tool to get different perspectives, either on something that you've already thought of or something that's already done. How exactly would you do that? So how do you get different opinions, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tom Golly, I wonder, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and get your opinion here with your mute off.
Can you, sorry about that. Been using Zoom for 3 years and I still do that. Can you give me the ability to share my screen? I think there's under share screen, there's something that you can, okay, good. Okay, let me, so I have the same thing. I also am subscribing to ChatGPT Plus. And so, so asking for opinions about something, what would be an example of something that you would like opinions about? Well, firstly, one thing to know about if I can answer the question about what GPT-3 and what ChatGPT and GPT-4 are, if I'll take this opportunity to answer that. Basically, what these are called models, large language models, and they're based on a very deep, complex calculation of a huge body of text. So that OpenAI has collected, they haven't revealed how much text they've collected from the internet, but probably the equivalent to billions of pages of text that has been somewhat.
Can I interrupt you for just a sec, Tom? Maybe you can unshare your screen while you're talking, and then when you're ready to, yeah, that would be great.
Okay,
and then
they've collected a huge amount of text, mostly from the internet, polished to some extent, and using these technology, which I don't understand, called transformers, to process the text very deeply. That requires a huge amount of computing time, computing resources to do all that processing. And then they get a model, which is a static model. And so when Richard was choosing between GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, well, that's this sort of a fixed circuit that was fixed at some particular time. So according to the window right now, the current version of ChatGPT was fixed on March 23rd. So it's different from a human mind, in that human mind is getting constant input and constantly processing it. It's done all the processing in the past, but it doesn't remember anything new. So if you ask it something about what happened yesterday, it won't be able to tell you. And I think that ChatGPT was, the information in it was frozen in September 2021. As far as GPT-4, when that was frozen is not completely clear. That OpenAI is becoming less revealing about what they've been doing. But the point is, what we're asking questions to is not like a live conscious mind. It's this fixed circuit that has been developed based on the processing of a huge amount of text. And there's an element of there's an element of randomness involved. And so that's why if you ask the same, Richard asked the same question about asking those terms, you got slightly different answers. Every time you ask the same question, you usually get somewhat different answers. And so, yes, Richard.
Yeah, so things are changing so rapidly. This morning, I was watching the beginning of a YouTube talk, an interview with an expert who wrote a book called Human Compatible. So if you make a note of that. And what he said was, he explained a large language model, LLMs, very, very succinctly. And so I'll repeat that for everyone. What ChatGPT is, what the large language model that it's based on is predicting the next word to come out. And if originally they called it a unigram, where you only predict the next word after Mary, for example. What's a common word that comes up after Mary in American English?
Had.
What?
Marry me.
Little lamb.
Oh,
Christmas. Okay. I'm sorry.
Christmas, because in fact the researcher said happy. What comes after happy? And then he said Christmas, and I'm going, oh, he's British. So that's a unigram, just going for the one after word after it. Then they had bigrams, so that what do you do after these 2 words, or a trigram after these 3 words? Do you know how many gram the ChatGPT LLM is? 32,000.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, we don't know because how large actually the training corpus was, but because it's a secret, but it's probably on the order of 20 to 30 trillion words. So basically, more than all of the books written in human history. I guess they could get that because it's from the internet. Pat, back to you, Tom.
Yeah, and so we're that processing of that. So it's not just predict. You'll hear people criticize it or dismiss ChatGPT saying it's just a Markov's chain that's predicting the next word, but it's much deeper than that. It's based on these very, very long chains of words, and then the processing goes through these transformers. There's I don't know the deal. It's something called the attention model. Well, and you can see it the amazing, if you ask it to produce like an essay, a 5-paragraph essay, or other things, it remembers what it said earlier. Okay, so it's not just it remembers things quite deeply, quite far before. And so I think just saying it's predicting the next word is not really a good way of understanding it. But so what we're doing now is when we're typing in prompts, we're giving instructions to it on what to do. Then it's based on this model that OpenAI developed, it's producing these responses. And in the development of it, OpenAI not only based it on a huge amount of text, they also ran it through a lot of human checkers. They apparently were outsourced a lot of things to Kenya, according to some reports. And so the human checkers were interacting with it, and when it had problematic responses, they would flag it. And so now it's very difficult to get it to say anything violent or sexual or political in ways. So it's been suppressed in that ways. I don't think that affects as much as for editors and translators, but it's something that is important for society.
Yeah, we can get into a little bit of societal issues too, and what they call alignment. This is what they call alignment. First of all, I wanted to mention that OpenAI is not open anymore. That happens to be the name of their company, and they started out as open source, but now they've gone to a for-profit model. However, they do control, as Tom is saying, just to try to make sure that it doesn't allow you to build a nuclear bomb or Molotov cocktail, for that matter. It just won't take you there. Or I think also, other matters.
One more point about the question about the difference between ChatGPT and GPT-4. So most people who are using it now are using the free version, which is based on an earlier model. It's either the GPT-3 or 3.5 model, which was fixed a year ago or 2 years ago. And then in middle of March, OpenAI released this GPT-4, which is a successor to that. As Richard said, you have to pay about 2,000 yen a month to have access to it. And it's now limited to, I think, 25 messages, 25 responses every 3 hours. So because their server capacity is limited. And so the difference between my tests, the difference between the free version, which anybody can use, and the GPT-4 version, I would say it depends on the task, but the GPT-4, the latest one, is maybe 30%, 40% better. So it's not a completely radically improved, but if you put the same question, the same task into both of them, often the GPT-4 is better, has fewer makes up fewer what are called hallucinations, which is with false facts. It doesn't hallucinate as much. If you have it write computer code, the computer code is more dependable, more reliable with the newest one. But if you just want to test it, if you just want to get a handle on how to use it, try the first version first, because that blew me away enough when I tried it in early December. It itself was amazing. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. Jason is putting a lot of interesting things. Jason and Nathan are putting a lot of interesting things into the chat, and I think it really depends. I wanted to ask Jason, maybe if you're now that you're sitting, maybe I could ask you to talk also, like, because you did mention that in the comparison to DeepL, that it's a lot better, but I would have to, I'd like to ask you to expand on that, because just in a recent project that I was doing, it was not noticeably better. So I imagine it depends on what material you're using.
I'm saying that I'm not talking directly just about the translation quality, because I'm not using it as a translation tool. I'm using it in a variety of different ways, and ChatGPT allows you to do that because it's not just translation. You can put any question that you want into that. Like you said, you can use it as a thesaurus. You can use it in a lot of different ways, and it really is limited to your imagination. And as more people are using ChatGPT as translators as well, the way that you engineer your prompts, the way that you reverse engineer prompts, the way that you use it to upsell into different services is going to probably make a big difference in how you can survive in this new AI world that we're living in. So just to give you one small example of how you can potentially upsell to your clients is that ChatGPT is an incredible SEO tool as well. So if your clients are doing a lot of blogs, for example, and you're helping them to translate blogs, you can use your abilities to generate SEO optimized articles on GPT and combine that with your translation skills. So it's just incredible the amount of things that you can do in and above translation. So I don't really want to talk about everything that I'm using it for, because at the end of the day, that's my company's,
Yeah, thank you very much.
Like IPO, like that's not like, it's like my proprietary information, but it's there for you to research, and it's there for you to experiment, and it's there, and really the sky's the limit, like, and I find it quite disingenuous to see a lot of translators saying that it's useless for their industry, and I think, to be honest, it's pride messing with a lot of people, thinking that a machine might be able to do a better job than them. And it's not to say that it's going to replace them. It might in the future, who knows? But I'm saying, like, it's an incredible tool. I'm not saying that it's going to replaces people now, but it can, if you're a great translator, it'll take your translation to the next level if you experiment with it. And you find how it can best work for you and for your clients. Like, I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Actually, yeah, I see you want to talk also, Tom. I'll let you talk in just a second. I wanted to say that one of my prompts, I think maybe if we had a communal, store of prompts, it would be great. Jason says, like, your prompts are kind of how you make things better. And I don't know if it's a trade secret or not. So I'll just share one that I have. It worked for one, type of job. I guess it was more marketing or something oriented. And all I said was, it's very common sense. I said, I did a translation myself from Japanese into English. And then I said, rewrite this at about the same length in a slightly more persuasive style. And just by doing that, there were turns of phrases that were really good. And yeah, I definitely said, okay, I'm going to take that. And I'm going to take that. As far as, before I turn it over to Tom, as far as, does it translate better than we can? I would have to say no. Human beings can translate better. I always find myself, this is, it's debatable, and I'm going to open up the floor. But what I wanted to say about this is that, when you're translating Japanese to English, there are many different angles to attack it from, for one thing. And if you ask it strictly to translate from Japanese to English, or one of the prompts I give is, please translate the following from Japanese to English accurately and professionally in natural English, using terminology from existing reference material as much as possible, as long as it is good English. Something like that for a prompt, initial prompt to get it a translation. I think maybe reworking the material might even be more useful. But it'll only give you one track. The same thing for DeepL. It decides, how to, and it gives you one possibility of the many that you can, when you're translating. And so I would have to say that, yeah, our imagination is the limit, not only in how we use the tool, but directly to translate. And we have to realize that these how to use it well is using a tool, but basically we have the control and the capacity, much greater capacity. That's what I have to say. Tom?
Oh, yeah, thank you. A couple. First of all, let me say I agree with Jason about the potential for this technology, and so it has a huge amount of potential. So the people, I'm dismissive. I've become increasingly dismissive of the people who dismiss it, because I do think it's a matter of sort of pride that a lot of people don't want to admit that it's potential. On the other hand, as Richard said, it's I mean, it's still that a human will produce a better translation. Okay, and the human will produce better writing, in the case of writing, with more personality and things like this at this stage. But that's a professional human, a skilled human. It does produce better translations, better text than an unskilled person and a non-professional. About the raw translation quality. So using the kinds of prompts Richard said, well, here's the text in Japanese. This is what it's for, translated in English. I would agree with many types of text. It's not too different from DeepL, okay? But there are certain types of text where I've done some tests on it where it was definitely better. And this was where you have a Japanese text in Japanese, where the subject of the sentences is clear from the context. So, for example, a paragraph where you know from this paragraph you're talking about this particular person, a singular female person, and then the other sentences in the paragraph about this person don't have subjects, and so they don't say whether the person, who the subject is. DeepL, Google Translate will screw that up. So each sentence is translated individually, and so you get he did this, and she did this, and they did this, and I did this. On the other hand, because GPT is able to grasp the context, to grasp the meaning, it's consistent in doing that. So in particular, translating narrative text, like excerpts from a novel that combines descriptions of events with conversation, Google Translate, DeepL are worthless. Okay, the result of that translation, you cannot comprehend what the story is. GPT is not perfect, okay, and there are problems, but you can follow the story, and so that's that. So its ability to grasp the context of long sequences of text makes it much better. Regarding prompts, I think we're all exploring how to use prompts for these things, so that I tend to do what Richard has done. This is the text I want to translate. This is the purpose of the text. This is how it's going to be used, and then judging whether that translation is appropriate or not. But just a couple of days ago, I'll put this into the chat right now. I got an example of a meta prompt I found online, where and I have got the link for it. So you ask GPT to suggest prompts for your particular task. And I've only tried it a couple of times, and it worked okay. But the point is, you can ask GPT for advice about how to use GPT. As with other things, its responses are not always reliable, but this active interaction can often lead to a better result than what something you would think of to begin with. Yeah, let me turn it over to Jeremy, if that's okay.
Thanks. This again may be something to talk about later, but what is there a limit on the volume of the text that you can put in at a single go?
Yeah, I think I asked GPT that. I think it said 4,000 tokens, and a token is the definition of a token is not necessarily the same thing as a word. I've done some speeches where I was translating a 5-6 page single space speech in Japanese into English, and I had to put that down into it in pieces, about 5 or 6 individual pieces, and as a result, some of the cohesion was lost because it would start in the middle, and it didn't know what was the previous paragraph, and so I would have to fix that later. So, yeah.
How did you know what the max was at that point, or how did you know that you had to break it up? Did you try with?
I put the entire text in. It says, "I'm sorry, I can't handle that at the same time." I got some error message back about the length.
I see.
Yeah.
You can look
I can
that
give
up
you
as well.
a quick demonstration, Jeremy, of, shall I? This is also that I was planning to do. So let me share my screen. The idea is to, so what I did is I took a Asahi Shimbun article and about Osaka casinos, and I copied, oh yeah, I guess I'll just do that right now. Copy and paste maybe just about this much. Well, why not a little bit more? As much as they give you. I copy it, and this is where we were before. Please translate this news article into English and go. And it starts. So you can see that it takes time. Whereas what I've copied, we're going to just let that run. And in the background, yeah, if I just do Command C, it copies it into DeepL, and you get the whole thing right away. And we go back to ChatGPT, and it's still working. And it stops at a certain point. You know, in Tom Golly's previous session that he did, he says, I usually go for a cup of coffee or something like that. So while it's still going, basically the differences are, here I have ChatGPT and DeepL. You can have a look for yourself a bit. These are the general outputs. Okay, I'm going to just cut it back. If it's too much text, it will cut it off, and you'll see that that it's cut off. And then I think you can say, please continue. I haven't tried it yet. Usually what I had done until this point is I find out where it stopped, then I copy the next section and plug it in. Yeah, and then the next section.
Yeah, you can say continue. You can say continue, and it will, just type continue, and it will continue.
Oh, that's great.
If you put in too much text from the beginning, it will refuse it from the start. Yeah,
I see. Yeah, that's very useful. Just continue to translate.
Yeah,
you can. It works sometimes, and it doesn't work sometimes.
Okay.
So I use keep going sometimes, but then the safest way would be, from my experience, would be like to say something like keep going and then colon, and then maybe type in the last sentence that it translated. Keep going from colon, and then you just paste in the last sentence that it's translated. That will probably give you the best results, but then it can also sometimes just once again, it might create a random translation. It might start from the beginning. So it's very temperamental. It's really like a human in that way, because depending on how it feels at the time, it can screw you around, and it can just mess with you. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's a tool, and you just have to be very careful with how you use it. And like I said in the comments, if you have good quality checks in place, then it's not going to be a problem. But it's really going to mess with a lot of bad translators that are just going to just dump in tons of text and then expect it to just do their work for free. It's just not going to work out that way.
Yes, in the chat, Beth Carey asks, do you get a better result if you say please? That's got to be a good joke. I don't know if anyone will experiment with that, but I would have to guess no.
Can I make a comment about the difference with DeepL? One thing about DeepL, especially the pro version of DeepL, it has some features that are designed to help translators, right? So you can create your own glossaries, and it will save your glossaries for you, and you can click on words, and it will give you alternate translation. And so in some ways, DeepL is more convenient if you're relying on machine translation, because the interface for GPT is not yet at that level. But I think it will get to that level. Just yesterday, somebody sent me to a link for some company in France that is developing kind of a DeepL-like interface but with GPT doing the translations in the background. And so if you've used machine translation a lot, it's probably you want to try them all and see what works for a particular task and keep up with the changes as they go ahead.
Yes, and it does have memory within the chat. You can, logically, it does remember everything that's in that chat. But if you type in new chat, then, if you put in different parts of the same text into a different chat, it doesn't have the background from what it just translated.
Yeah.
But within the same chat thread, it will be able to keep the logical continuity. I'm sure there are other questions or points that were raised in the chat that I glossed over toward the beginning when we started to get into things. Is there anything that someone would like to a point to bring up now that we can kind of pivot to, either in the chat or speak? Yes, Lynn.
I think for us, one of the most important things is that we affirm that this is another tool that requires our judgment, and also helps us exercise our talents even better. And I have always argued that only a human will do for a lot of the work that SWET members do, because we know what the context is, we know what the client wants, we know what their requirements about terminology are, and all of the things that are specific to each particular job and task we are required to do. So unless we take time to create this wonderful prompt that includes all of those elements, restrictions that we have in our brains for that particular job, ChatGPT or DeepL cannot perform as well as we are. So this is a perfect chance for us to reaffirm that what we're doing is pretty special, and give ourselves a pat on the back, while, as everyone here is saying, yeah, let's use these things. Let's take advantage of everything to do it better and save us grunt work. So really, I think a lot of us would like to have more emphasis on, okay, now we know that we're important and special. So let's do it and use this as best possible.
There's one other thing. Thank you very much, Lynn. Those are really important points. And one other thing I'd like to add to that is that in a translation, we can read between the lines, which an AI can't. And as Lynn pointed out, we can, we know the greater parameters, and we can say, you know, for the audience, the reading audience, it's not so important to put the name of the ancient Japanese text and the author who created it, but to say that it was, you know, a Neo-Confucianist Japanese philosopher who in the 17th century. So you can change things, you can add things for context, and you can take things away, and that's our judgment as a translator. That was one point. The other point I wanted to say that I find it useful using ChatGPT for is kind of just give me a summary of this topic, or a summary of this area, and it just comes out very quickly, as you saw, or if you know, if you've used it. Of course, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Not everything is going, it's just predicting the next word or the next words, and based on what it's seen before. So it can be wrong, but it can give you a general overview of what you need to do. And Cheryl Chow wrote in the text in the chat, I use it to help me brainstorm my novel. Then it absolutely doesn't matter if it makes things up, because it's a novel, it's fiction. And don't just use what it gives you. And that also becomes an ethical consideration for translators. And while I'm at it, I'll just keep moving on to another topic of the ethics of using something that just straight copy paste. There's I'll just bring that up and say that, you know, how you use it can be problematic. Oh yeah, what else? Somebody also wrote that, well, I know one person who can't use what online because whatever you put into ChatGPT 4 becomes their, you know, property to input to their next, you know, it's their language, large language model. So they can't use it because of non-disclosure agreements. And having said that, there's development underway for being able to have one of these LLMs on your desktop, your PC, so that you don't have to go onto the web and then share your, you know, secret information, your proprietary translation work. So that'll be coming soon as well. You can just have it on your computer. I don't know how they do it, but yes, Tom.
Yeah, can I talk about it a little bit? I read this website called Hacker News every day, so I kind of try to keep up with the latest developments. So there are a lot of people trying to develop large language models that you can then download and run on your own computer. They exist. I tried a couple, and they were just so much worse than GPT-4 at this stage that I wouldn't consider using it for any practical purposes. So they're much smaller, and they haven't been trained and refined with human input as much. But there's a lot of effort being put in that area, and so I expect that they will, ones that you can run locally that you could use under a non-disclosure agreement, will become available soon. So I was going to say something else, but I forgot, so I'll turn it back to you, Richard.
Yeah, okay, it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
May I add something, Richard?
Please. Yeah, Jason?
I totally agree with what Lynn is saying, but I will add that ChatGPT and other AI tools are in their infancy. So for us to think that this will always be the case is also a little bit naive. And so I would say that please look at all of the different new Web3 technologies that are out there, because it might come, the day might come where we don't have a job as translators anymore. And I'm not trying to be rain on anyone's parade, but it is a possibility. If ChatGPT is so good at this point in time, and it's been what, less than 6 months or something so since it's just been released, the day might come where we have to look for another job or be just on the universal basic income. You know, it's our choice, but I would just say that don't always think that your job is going to be secure, because I think a lot of jobs, especially white collar jobs, lawyers, I think lawyers, for example, that's a job that might go out the window very soon. Especially a lot of white collar jobs might be on the line. So it looks like we're okay for now, but it might not be the case in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 2 years, who knows. That's all.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Jason, just before you add to that, Tom, I wanted to say that that was the first thing that I was going to say too. This is in its infancy, and it's just going to keep getting better. But at the moment, we need to have the experts use the tools. So it's not an immediate jump to replace us. You know, there will be we become more, you know, reliant on thinking the way that it thinks. And so, for example, not thinks, but anyway, the example is that if you use, you know, MT or ChatGPT for, you know, technical stuff, even you're going to have consistency problems. And then you have to check it, be even more vigilant to check what, if you copy and paste it back, how did I do that before? This was a copy paste thing from before, but each time it's slightly different. And so it's more, you know, could be, you know, not more trouble, but in a different way, you have to address the things that are part of the translation in total. Tom?
Oh yeah, so a couple of things. Yeah, thanks. A couple of things about the technology involving. So maybe it was more than a month ago that OpenAI announced that they've developed what they call a plugin system, which is sort of a system of macros or programming language that you can produce mainly with human language, with natural language, to automate tasks. And so that would include, for example, presumably asking it to, you know, double check this translation, is it correct? Do a web search to find how this terminology is done, using terminology consistently. As soon as they announced that, I applied for access to it as on a beta version, and I still haven't gotten access to it. So, but that's the next development of the technology. Some of the things that it now is not so good at, and we will probably, we or others will be able to automate it and using its own tools to make it better for our particular purposes. Another thing, I just put in the chat, in around April 10th or so, Google released a beta version or an experimental version of their own chatbot called Bard. I just got access to it about 9:30 last night. So I used it for about an hour and was comparing it with GPT-4. First of all, it refused to do translation. It says it only does English right now. Okay. The interaction with it was very similar to the interaction with the free ChatGPT. When I gave it some other tasks, for example, I gave it a passage from kind of a novel by a few paragraphs from a novel by Norman Mailer. And I asked it to say, what does this sentence mean? What does this sentence mean? The kind of sentence that a typical high school student would have trouble of figuring it out. It gave me an explanation that I don't think was correct. GPT gave me an explanation which was correct, was quite insightful, in fact. And so the GPT-4 is still better than what Google has now. But according to news reports, Google is suddenly trying to shift the direction of their huge ship to make it more, to make it catch up with OpenAI in these AI things. And so that it will, Google and other companies will have, you know, they will keep getting better as well too as the time goes on. So, if I can respond to something, actually, to completely agree with what Lynn said earlier. This is I made a couple of video for this on YouTube a few weeks ago. I completely agree that for surviving in this business, in this industry, is that our knowledge of the clients and of serving the client's needs is the way to survive. Okay, so obviously learning these tools is necessary. Okay, because if we don't learn these tools, we'll be outcompeted by others who can use the tools. But I think even more important is that we have, I guess maybe part of my perspective is having been both on the so I was a translator for 20 years. Then I worked as a salaryman for 17 years at a university. And so I was on the opposite side in that case. So rather than receiving requests for translation, I was on the position of sometimes sending out requests for translation or for other services like that. And so you kind of see it in a different perspective when you have a fixed budget and your demands for quality might be different from it. But there's also the fact that even at the university where I was working, there were a lot of people, especially staff members, who were kind of naive about language issues. They're naive about, to what extent they need to be correct in their English, to what extent they don't need to be correct, what is, and so this is especially true in companies, I think, is that a lot of companies are very naive about language problems, and that what a translator, an editor, a language expert can do can help them solve their problems, which are often not the quality of the translation. Often it's the message that they're saying. They need to be saying something else. They don't just getting this doc. Yes, Lynn, let me turn it over to you.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I think many SWET members realize is that we have specific clients who rely on us.
Yeah.
Because they know that we will give them what they expect, especially if their English is not as good as enough to judge the difference. And my own clients, for example, rely totally on us for having something they can say, yeah, this is good, I'll just go with this. So if we don't provide the level of correctness that they're accustomed to, they'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I can tell that. And we try to make using Japanese and non-Japanese language experts as part of our formula for negotiating all of these tools, the dictionaries, the internet research, everything, so that the client does get what they expect. And more and more Japanese who need language services are being able to judge the difference. But of course, there's still a long ways to go there, because there's so many people who, as you point out, they don't know. They can't decide whether a period goes here or there, or how to paragraph, or whether the article is needed or not needed, or all of these things which we wordsmiths have trained ourselves to do.
Yeah, that's the added value that we provide. We're the total service provider for the translation. Our clients can come back and ask us questions about it, and then we can revise and things like that. And that's very important. One other thing on the topic of improving these ChatGPT in particular, one of the presentations I saw at TED Talk this morning was by the OpenAI developer. He said that now they have what's called a browsing model. It's a plugin for ChatGPT. And so I immediately Googled it, and it's in alpha. You can sign up for it, but you're not necessarily going to get it. And you can fact check. You can say, please fact check this for me within ChatGPT. And it will, the browser or browsing, I'm not sure, model. And so it will show you each step that it goes through, and they've programmed it so that it's transparent. You can see the steps that it goes through. It does a Google search, and then it got this information from that, etc. So that's one point. The other point is that Lynn, you also mentioned these tools. So ChatGPT is not the only tool, and it's not the only AI that's being developed. There's hasn't been mentioned here, but Microsoft Bing is a version of GPT-4. There's Google Bard, but there's also something called open-assistant.ai, Open Assistant. And that's an actual open source movement, or that is, it, in contrast to the for-profit, developers. So I don't know how that's going to turn out, but again, we're in our infancy. And the other point that I wanted to make was that these are not the only tools, and other things are developing. On the web, I don't know if you've seen Weblio or Reverso or something that, or Ludwig, which give you different ways to, I can do a little demo, I was thinking, enhance your translation, or gives you examples in context. Whereas we would have to go to a dictionary and we didn't give enough context, for a single word definition. This can give you large, different tools can give you more context and enhance your translation. But I'd like to, again, open it up for questions and comments. Charles? Nope, still mute. Okay.
Can you hear me? I have a question, but I need a lead-in. About more than 50 years ago, I was taking a translation course at Waseda with a British teacher, and we were all using the old Kenkyusha Waijitan, and he said, you used the expression read between the lines, and he said, and it was really katai, the old version, and it's all become so much better. The new YG10 is, I've got it on my Denshi Jisho, and I don't think translators felt threatened by any of this. This is much better. Or I think I work in classical Japanese, and the Kongoji 10 are so much better than they used to be. And no one feels threatened by it. But this new technology has us all scared, even people like me who are old and not doing it so much anymore. My question, I guess, is what is it about this new technology that is so scary? We all think it's, we all like we all like being able to look up kanji on our Denshi Jisho, but we don't worry that a company's going to say, we're going to pay you less because you have an easier job, right? But with this new technology, we are scared.
I wouldn't say that it's scary. First of all, I would say that depends on your perspective. So you can choose to be scared of the technology, or you can choose to embrace it, and you can choose to explore it, and you can choose to see where it can take you to potentially even greener fields. I think technology, I think there was somebody I heard the other day that says technology doubles in its capacity every 18 months. And this might even, this span might even change with AI technology, with blockchain technology, with all these different types of Web3 technologies that we're experiencing right now. So I think, in all honesty, from my perspective, don't be scared of it. Just first start off with the free version of ChatGPT, and just play around with it, and read up on the literature. Look up, there are a ton of different people talking about ChatGPT on YouTube, talking about all the different ways that you can make money with ChatGPT, not just through translation, not just, I think if you look at life and how many different ways there are to make money in today's world, there are way more ways to make money, way more ways to make a living today, and we don't have to just rely on translation if we choose to. And I guess that just, once again, that just depends on your perspective. So, I mean, I love being a translator. I love having a translation agency, but if the market forces push me out of translation, I'm moving out, you know, like, and I'm already looking at different options, you know, like just to see what's out there, because I mean, I'm not at the tail end of my career. I'm sort of like in the middle of my career. So I still need to think about how I'm going to look after my family and my children. So I'm keeping a very open-minded approach to what's happening, and just trying to keep up with everything that's going on, and not be scared. I would say that would be the first thing. Don't be scared of the technology, because we all have the capability to understand it and to use it to the best of our abilities.
I agree with everything that you said. But as you point out, it does depend on the point in your career. I was initially quite frightened by it, and it continues to frighten me occasionally. And I think the reason why I'm frightened, to answer Charles' question, is that it is able to do things that I thought only an expert human could do. In particular, is able to do things that I thought only I could do, or somebody, you know, like people in this meeting could do, but that my clients couldn't do. Okay, and so especially I had this gap of 17 years in my career as a translator. I'm back into doing much more translation and that kind of things now in my retirement. And so if I look back 25 years ago, there were a lot. I supported myself, I supported my children, I supported my family, and probably 80% of what I did in those days, 80% of my time could now be automated, could now be offloaded to GPT. So that's for somebody who is, if I had stayed in that career doing the same thing, especially if I had been taking work from agencies. So rather than working directly with clients, if I was, you know, there were a lot of people, especially Japanese English translators outside of Japan, who rely on work from agency. I got an email yesterday from somebody who's been doing work for the same client through an agency for I think he said a decade or longer. It's the same kinds of text coming in every month, and it's, you know, it's he's very good at it. It's very consistent about it. But that kind of sort of repetitive work where there's a gap between the translator and the client. Okay, there's an agency between them. Then that's the kind of work that will be hit by this thing. So I can imagine somebody like that being very afraid in this. If you have a good job, you have a good career that is, you know, it's the metaphors that people use are, you know, you're a shoemaker, you're a tailor, you're a horseshoe maker, you know, and so the technology, the society has changed. And if you've been doing that for 20, 30, 40 years, and if that's the only thing you know, then it's frightening. Okay. But if, as Jason says, if you, regardless of your age, if you follow the technology, see what can be done with it, see what possibilities are opening up, and the fact that the human element, the human interaction element, is still really important. The fact, as Lynn said, the fact that clients come to depend on and trust, they come to trust their translators or their advisors, their consultants on language, then that's an area where I think you can use these tools to survive and to build your business and continue your business. So.
Yes, thank you, Tom. One other thing I wanted to bring up was that in this general area of what are we being replaced? Maybe more people in the translation industry are starting to get this. Are you willing to do post-editing of machine translation? I think it's NTPE, right? Are you willing to do that? And if they ask it in that way, are you willing to do that? It usually means the rate is much, much lower. And also it's kind of
that depends on how good you are at negotiating, though, Richard.
Okay, well taken. I haven't been in that situation, but people some people just as a matter of pride will say no, or so it could be a matter of, yeah, okay, I'll open it up. Who wants to speak first, Lynn or Tom? Lynn?
Well, I did receive something like that recently, and the client was a little bit naive in thinking that any machine translation would do to translate a sentence. And then they thought that it could be charged as editing instead of translation. But the sentence was very badly translated by the MT program, so it had to be redone. If they had asked me, they probably cannot judge which one, how to do it. But I realized that I need to refuse to do editing of post-translation if I know that the result is going to be worse than redoing it. I need to advise them to consider that we are translators and we would prefer to do the translation from scratch to give them the quality that they're accustomed to receiving. So it's a kind of education thing too. You need to help them understand how they make the decision between using MT and using a translator who can take it further, do something, give them something of higher quality. And it really depends on the client whether they will know the difference.
I suspect there's a lot of that work going on. So these large international language service companies, often based in Europe or in India or someplace like that, who deal with jobs that are maybe thousands of pages long. These huge government or corporate clients, and so they're for them the price is and the speed are really, really important. So I imagine they have armies of post editors, pre-editors, and post editors doing that. And it doesn't sound like, but I think that the point is that it doesn't require bilingual skills, or they're trying to do it in ways where they can just have a checker on both sides and not somebody who can read both languages. And it is viable, to be honest. It is viable for certain types of text, and the price competitiveness is it can't be ignored, and the ability to deal with these huge volumes of text, which a freelancer cannot do. But I agree. So if you want to survive as an individual freelancer, then that's not a market to begin with. Okay, that's not an attractive market. Also, I've never been asked to do that for work, but I've thought about what it would be like to make a living post editing machine translation, and it just seems painful, especially before DeepL, maybe in the Google Translate age, or before 2016. It was just. Oh, it was just so bad. And now these days, where it's not as painful as it used to be, but it's still not. If you have the bilingual skills, it's not something I would want to do.
Yeah, something I'd like to get back to. Unless you have one more comment on that, Jason.
No.
Well, I would just say that there's another opportunity there to say that, well, I'm so good at you because you've studied ChatGPT, and because you're so good at generating prompts or doing reverse engineering, you could say to the client, well, I can be your ChatGPT prompt generator, and then I will be the editor as well, and then you get two jobs for one. Once again, it just depends on your perspective and how good you are at using the technology and how good you are at being a salesman.
Yeah, so it's been mentioned a couple of times that bad machine translation it takes more time to fix it. You're much better off if you're a professional translator doing it from scratch. I did have an interesting client situation, a well-educated client who's an agency doing translation, and she said to me, my end client doesn't mind. In fact suggests, I think she didn't say in fact suggests, but doesn't mind if you use DeepL, if you base the translation on DeepL. So can you do this translation using DeepL and just give me a discount? And I go, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that. And so I could use it was a lot of technical thing, and that's the key point, is that what type of thing are you translating? There was a lot of technical parts of it, and so I go, okay, I'll leave this, I'll leave this. And then I look through it carefully and I say, okay, this is, this is off. I can retranslate this. And generally I do all of the quality control on the project. And I calculate my, how many hours I spent on it. I calculate what my, the rate per hour that I want. And based on the standard per word rate that I get, okay, this is how much I'll charge. I'm happy with it. The client got a 500 yen discount per page or something. And there you go. All sides were happy. That was not being, it wasn't imposed on me, this MTPE. It was like, go ahead and use it. I go, okay, sure. And, give me the discount. Okay, sure. The other thing, yeah, I lost my train of thought. Other comments?
Richard, I just think we should be careful not to offer to use DeepL or GTP at a discount too quickly. I think once you get into something, it could be actually more work. So really be cautious about that.
Yes. And the other important thing is that if you're working for an agency, I think Jason put it into the chat. You really need to have the conversation with your client, who's the agency. How much of this is okay to use, because it feels like cheating, and they say, I have the feeling that the reason they're getting work is the issue of trust. They're a trusted agency for the end client, and that trust is extended to you as the freelancer, as a translator. And if you're just copying pasting, that's a definite no-no. And so you do need to work out the ethical parameters with whoever you're working with, and to yourself as well. If you're just doing it to save time, I'm just going to throw this in. When you could do a better job if you translate from scratch, then you have to be honest with yourself. This is taking a quality hit, and I'm only doing it to save time. That's also something you need to look at.
If I can just, this is sort of I'm in an unusual position right now because I was a freelance translator like many of you for 20 years, and I worked at a university for 17 years, and then now since I retired at the end of last month, I'm now in a part-time position at the same university where my main responsibilities are helping the head office of the university with their English language communications. So that's sometimes it's rewriting English produced by native Japanese speakers. Sometimes it's translating, the president's speeches into English and things like that. And so I guess what my main shift in perspective from having been a freelance translator to now essentially an in-house translator, and at being an in-house translator when having been a faculty member of the university for 17 years, is my awareness of how I'm knowing about the university's policy and its stance and its, how decisions are made within the university and how it wants to present itself to the world. I can contribute to the university's communications in ways that an outside translator has difficulty doing. So some of the work I've been doing I was doing this work for the last couple of years was, for example, there was some official statement that the university had sent out to a translation agency. And then I and one of my colleagues, we were asked to, rewrite it and check it before done. And so it's a very interesting experience because the quality, I think the agency was probably Simul. I never found out, but it was a good agency, and they were good translations. But I realized how there was value that I could add as an insider that that the agency would never be able to do, in the sense of knowing, well, this is not what the university wants to say about this. This is not the way it would say it. And so it's not with the terminology so much, it's the message itself. And so I think that's, from my perspective, having gone through this transition, I realize that's something that it is not going to be taken away by GPT very soon, I don't think. So that's why one thing I've been kind of emphasizing in the last few months is to what extent the translator or the writer can help the client not only with the words and the punctuation and the smoothness of the writing, but also the message themselves when it's writer-driven translation. And so that's something that I think for a lot of freelancers, you're kind of, you're separate from the business world, or you're separate from how the client is doing their business. But that's often where they need the most help, is that they, even the University of Tokyo, even the president's office of the University of Tokyo, which is very, very qualified and sophisticated and smart and internationally minded, they will put out these messages that were intended for a domestic Japanese audience, that assume knowledge of that the Japanese readers have, and that they're not aware, or just they lose track of the fact that their international audience won't know those things. And so the fact that the message has to be changed to some extent. And so I think that's one opening, I think. So in addition to learning these tools, which is very valuable, is also trying to find a relationship with a client where you can be a consultant about not only how they say things, but to some extent what they say. I don't know how much, obviously my situation is quite unique in that regard, but I can imagine many companies, private companies, would benefit from the same kind of advice, the same kind of services from somebody who could, and not only about the content, but then would be able to produce the final documents as well too.
That's a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Tom. So yeah, language consultant and a linguistic expert or something along those lines. So we're getting very close to the end. Yeah, it's 11:30. Perhaps we can follow up on the SWET mailing list with additional discussion. I'd like to put it, ask everyone to go there, put in your comments, questions, and just hand it over to Lisa, I suppose, to say a final goodbye.
Thanks, Richard, and everyone. That was excellent. I know I'm still got a few questions to ask. So as you suggest, the SWET list might be a good place to do that. I'll go ahead and end the recording unless anyone else has something official to say for the meeting.
Yeah,
you can stay here with us on them.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really grateful to Richard for being willing to organize this session, and Tom for all his expertise, and Jason and everyone else who has spoken. This is one of the great things about SWET, is that we have such a wonderful mixture of people, and that we're not afraid to ask questions from the very beginning, and that we can get expert answers like this. It's just really wonderful community. And SWET, if you go to the SWET website and look for the button on the top page, you will be able to sign in.
Okay, I guess we can end the recording. Thanks very much, everybody.